Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first session of what I hope promises to be a really exciting and fruitful conversation across multiple themes. I wanted to begin by first thanking Nabila Taskin and Aisa for coordinating this. It takes incredible ingenuity, fortitude, patience to put something like this together, in particular under the political and social conditions Muslims in particular find themselves in the UK, and including in higher education. So I really want to express how proud and remarkable this work has been. We are going to start with the conversation with a presentation by Dr. Ahmed Keeler, who's a visiting fellow here at the Center for Islamic Studies and was a distinguished fellow at the Faculty of Leadership and Management at the University Sans Islam Malaysia. He received his doctorate of laws, honorary doctorate of laws from the University of Bolton in 2016. And for several decades now, he's been an incredible scholar and organizer around questions of Islamic culture and its multiple manifestations, giving talks, lectures, organizing festivals. And we're really incredibly honored to have him with us today. And his latest book, which has just come out in 2019, which looks really exciting, is called Rethinking Islam in the West, I wanted to get this title right, a new narrative for the age of crises. So I really encourage you all to pick it up. We hope to have him speak for about half an hour, 35 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to a conversation. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Keeler.
My goodness, this is quite an amazing thing to have at the early hour of a Sunday morning, faced with such a wonderful, glorious collection of beautiful and lovely faces. Thank you all so much, and thank you very much the way that this has been organized. It's been a great delight to be able to participate in this. I have been here in this university, or on the edges of this university, because I came here because of my wife. In 1992, she came to do her PhD, and I just came on her, following along. And we've been here now for about 28 years. And when I first came to Cambridge, I wanted to try to understand this extraordinary place. And after a while, I began to realize it was like a gold field, like one of those early gold fields with all the diggers going down deep into these holes, coming up. And they were all going up and down in all these different holes. But there was no connection. There was no connection across. There was nothing that connected anything up. And this is extraordinary because if you think about it, university, where does it come from? Universitat. Whole. Universe. Unity. Now we are standing in one of the most powerful institutions, King's College, in probably the most powerful university in the creation of the modern world. This is no exaggeration. And I think that what is absolutely essential to understand is that this university, like all the other universities of the modern world, which are supporting and creating the modern world, that this university reflects not a West that is unitive, but a West that is three completely separate worlds, living in coexistence, but continuous contradiction. And these are the Christendom, civilization, and the modern world. The world of the saints, the world of the warrior statesman, and the world of the merchant. Each world has a completely different environment. Each world has a completely separate art form. And each world has a completely unique, different knowledge system to support it. And there is nowhere where this clarity of these three worlds is more precise than here in England. Let us begin with the Christian world. England was converted by the saints, the monks, who totally dedicated their lives to Almighty God, that followed in the footsteps of Jesus, renouncing everything. And these monks encountered a world of villages and tribes, the newly conquered lands of the Germanic tribes. And the church was the center of these worlds. And then this world grew into a huge spiritual presence. Just look at the saints of Canterbury. Look at this building. Look at the buildings that surround it, how it completely dwarfs them. Everything was contained within that building. The whole culture was within that building. And these buildings were right across the great Saint of the North, St. Cuthbert, and Durham Cathedral, the great saint of East Anglia, St. Etheldreda, and the incredible Ely Cathedral. And inside, the worshipper who entered into this immense worlds was surrounded by every art that could recall the beauty and the power of revelation. The building soared towards heaven. The spiritual ascent was huge. And the power of those buildings. Everything was contained there. And the human being was surrounded and was receiving through his senses, through his eyes, through his ears, the experience, that Christian experience of the inward world. And then something happened. Within the space of some 20 years, this world of inner wealth and richness and extreme spirituality was completely destroyed. More than 1,000 buildings, great abbeys, monasteries, were destroyed. The whole art of education, the whole art of health, the whole art of looking after the poor, and most important, the contemplative, inner, spiritual life of the Christian who was totally dedicated to Almighty God. All destroyed. And if you go around England, you will find all over England the evidence of these buildings, these ruins. But what happened next was really extraordinary. What happened next is the most extraordinary thing, because we now come to the point where all that is left of Christianity is a translated Bible. No culture. So what happened? Now we come to that second part of the civilized world, the world that we hear so much about. Whenever there's an outrage, we talk about the civilized world, the civilized world. What is this? What is this civilized world? This is the world when, having destroyed the living culture, they step out of it and dig up a world that has been dead and buried for 1,000 years and worship it. They call it classical. Classic. It becomes the perfect ideal. This becomes the world which they do. And they create these temples into which they gather all the bits and pieces of destruction, all the broken columns, the broken sculptures, and put them in this mausoleums. And from God, the focus turns to man. Man becomes the measure of all things. Man becomes the center, and man is looking out. He's no longer receiving. He's looking out. The painting, the art starts to be that of perspective, where you are at the center and you are looking out. And the work of art, instead of being a whole environment in which the human being is surrounded, becomes the fragmented object of an individual's pleasure. Because the art moved into the new world that was being created, the world of the warrior statesmen, the aristocrats. Art which was not seen by the common people. It was a part of this new culture. Because the whole environment was being transformed. The great Roman Vitruvius was taken, and his work was taken as the Bible. And they last started to reconstruct the world. The Christian world had been organic. Every village, every town was different. Every building was unique. It was organic. Now everything is being planned from outside. Was being looked at from outside, was being organized from outside. And at this point, the most extraordinary thing happens, because having stepped out of the world that they had been within, they were now worshipping and glorifying a new world that they were creating, and they found the world that they had come out of ugly. And they called it Gothic. tribal terms of the Germanic tribes that had been invading 500, 1,000 years before. And in order to cover the shame of this Gothic, what did they do? They put classical fronts on the Gothic buildings. This is the one in Cambridge, next to the Senate House. Gothic building with a classical front. If you go around the side, you can see the join, like a piece of theatre. It's just cutting. And there's the Gothic building behind. With the fire of London, the possibility came to completely reorder and restructure the capital. And the building of St. Paul's became the building of a temple, a Roman temple. And all over England, instead of all the abbeys and the monasteries, their lands had been given to the new warrior statesmen, the new merchants, and their houses everywhere were being built. Huge palaces everywhere. Because you see, what had happened was that St. Francis had been replaced by Augustus Caesar. The world of the saint had now become the world of the warrior statesman. And all over England, great statues and monuments celebrating the warriors and the statesmen were built. In education, the classics of Rome and Greece became the center of the curriculum, of the higher educational curriculum. And the Bible, religious divinity studies came gradually into the wings. But this division was very important, and it had an enormous impact upon the way we think, and it was the beginnings of the ingredients of modernity. Because we were no longer inside a world being formed by it. We were outside looking at it as observers. We were talking about things. Education became a matter of talking about, learning about, not becoming. And another devastating thing happened, and that was that this new classical world that had been produced through the imagination, because you cannot have a dialogue with a dead world. You can only talk to it. You can only imagine about it. You can't actually have a living relationship with it. But this strange relationship with the dead world was a completely exclusive elite matter. The generality of people knew nothing about Cicero or Virgil, nothing. They were left with their base culture. This was an elite world. So you had a great separation, so that there was no culture which all of the whole society were able to engage in and participate in and be a part of. Now we come to the point of this division, which we are very well of here in Cambridge, the division, the separation between the different humanities, sciences, religious studies, etc., etc. And now we come to the modern world. Now the glorious idealism and love and worship and adoration of Greece and Rome had produced one of the essential ingredients for the modern world. And that was being detached from the object of your study. That was from being an observer of something that is outside of you. So instead of being a part of something, a part of the whole of our creation, we become the observer. And of course, as we know, as Muslims, there is only one observer. There is only Almighty God who is our observer. Other than that, we are all of us subjects. So to take up that role of observer, we are moving and treading into the realm of the Almighty. But this detachment needed a powerful active ingredient to produce the modern world. In Christendom, Thomas Aquinas, the great doctor of the Catholic Church, attempted to produce universitat, wholeness. He attempted to take the faculties of the human being, that of the faculties of knowledge, and to unify them into one comprehensive understanding of the revelation. Now here we have to introduce a principle, which is a very important principle, which is the Mariological principle. It's very simple. The whole can contain the part cannot contain the whole. Now, we as human beings, when relating to and responding to revelation, have three ways in which we can approach it. We can approach it through mystical cognition, through the experience of it. We can approach it through our reasoning mind, and we can approach it through our senses, through the artist, through the eyes, through the ears. And in Islam, and this is where I've been very privileged to be able to work with Hassan Spiker over the last 3 years. And he has shown how in Islam, all of these faculties reached a point of stability and fulfillment. And there was wholeness in response to the revelation. But in Christianity, the attempt by Aquinas failed, because the reasoning mind simply could not be satisfied. And what happened was the reasoning mind and the senses were detached from the religion. And rationalism and empiricism, two big isms, were formed. And revelation became inaccessible. And this is the theologian, who was a great theologian, who took that path because the reasoning mind could not comprehend the Trinity and the Incarnation. It made no sense to that mind. So Luther, from the Reformation religion of Protestantism, of Lutheranism, the split with Rome, banished reason from religion. Banished. Reason had no place It was simply a matter of pure faith. You had to believe. That was the only way that you could access the divine. And this allowed for this new detached mind. This new detached mind was now given its power to take that reason and apply it entirely to the material realm, because the senses now no longer were engaged in the ascent towards revelation, but became enmeshed with the reasoning mind in the material realm. And this horrific assault upon nature, the results of which we are now experiencing every day in our lives and hovers over us, was created, was begun. And Descartes, using only his reasoning mind, with nothing but the reasoning mind, started to see everything as a mechanical aspect, because that is as far as the reasoning mind penetrates on its own. And Newton, through mathematics, turned everything into mathematics. Everything into mathematics, so that the world became seen as a clockwork world. It's a world that was created through machinery. And this is where you see the way in which the mereological principle is realized, when it is broken. Because when the part assumes the whole, you have aberration. You have something that is completely deformed. And what could be more deformed than the scientist's vision and the scientist's creation of this miserable, miserable robot? This way in which Almighty Allah created man, and man has created the machine. This is what has come out of the reasoning mind's imagination. And because the reasoning mind cannot see beyond its own limitations when trying to understand how everything came into existence, you have this absurd concept that we are developing into cyborgs. Astaghfirullah, what a stupidity. The chthonic principle is the other principle we now encounter, because the minute you break the balance, the minute you break the mereological principle and you enter into matter, you are entering into a very powerful zone. And the chthonic principle, thonos, from the god of the underworld of the Greeks, is that the deeper you go into matter, the greater the forces that are released. During my lifetime, I witnessed the opening of this terrifying event, which in my book I talk about. The age of crises began with this, because the minute we stepped across the breach and breached that limit and came to the point where we could destroy ourselves, we had entered into crisis. And since then, there have been multiple ways in which this has happened. Now we go deeper into matter. The CERN, smashing, trying to find more and smaller parts to smash and to try to understand and grasp. And the problems multiply, All around us, more crisis, until the very atmosphere is now heating up. We have actually succeeded in heating up the atmosphere. And here in Cambridge, we have two things happening in the deep research. On the one hand, we have institutions like the British Antarctic Survey, who are dealing with the crisis, who are trying to come up with solutions, scientific solutions, which can somehow stem and stop the crisis. And then you've got the other half, the other wing of the research establishment, which is like the nanotechnology department, where you're going deeper, they're going deeper and deeper into matter and releasing more and more powerful destructive forces. One hand, the other hand. But for this whole world to really be realized, you needed a marriage between this new scientific mind. Because the scientific mind in itself, this new knowledge mind, couldn't do it. So it needed to have a marriage. And the marriage was with the merchant, because the merchant is the one who actually engages with matter. He passes this from here, he is dealing with the material realm. That is his role. So we now have the marriage. Arkwright, Newton, and the world of craft to the world of the machine, and we move into machine time, machine space, which replaces that of the human. But all through the 19th century, this world that was forming in England was clothed in a revived Christianity and civilization. When you had the great meeting of the merchants in the Guildhall, they were in a Gothic building with classical statuary. And London was a Roman city. If Julius Caesar had come in, he'd gone into what he thought was a temple, and he would have found it was a bank. It's a very strange world. Because you see, it was in America that this world transformed into a culture. It was here that the civilization, the modern civilization, was created. And here are some of the great creators of the modern civilization. These are the men who started to produce everything that the human being required and more. And then started to work on all those things that the human being would like to have. And the world was transformed, and the artist became the perpetuator and the salesman for this glorious new world of everything, playing upon the mass, playing upon every aspect of the human being that the human being would like. And this world changed so that the shopping mall became a new temple. But we couldn't get rid of it. We couldn't get rid of the things that we were having. And a new way of life was created between work and leisure. Leisure belongs to us. The short leisure belongs to us. Work is hard. It's monastic. It takes up most of your lives. Leisure belongs to you. You can go and enjoy your holidays in paradise until it's ruined by too many people. We now go and look at nature. We look at the natural world, which is shrinking more and more. And the world of religion is a personal matter. And we can go to any number of museums and see any number of dying and dead civilizations, and we can eat all the different foods of the world. And here we have the countryside being taken over by the machine, and the people coming into these dyslexic cities like Chicky. And the child is now completely dominated by the machine outside with the irises of the imagination. The old people, where are they? Where are the old people and the young people together. Because what has happened is that the center has been changed. The center of this new world is the financial center, the financial district, the money, because everything is being transformed into money. And the religious heart, the religious spiritual center is completely overwhelmed. These centers are going everywhere, and the heart of this world is the stock market. Why? Because everything depends upon, everything has to go up, and that's heaven. If it goes down, that's hell. That's it. That is the modern structure. That is the modern structure. And here in Cambridge, we have an educational system, an educational place where more and more departments are being created to manage a more and more complex material world. And in order to provide the requirements to maintain and to continue this material world, children are being taken younger and younger and indoctrinated into this whole process. And now we have in Cambridge 3 systems of education. We have the memory of the Christian, but it's no longer becoming Christian, it's learning about Christianity and about any other religion. We have the classics, which have shrunk, which gave birth to the humanities. And we have the sciences and business studies. Because what is critical and what is central to the modern world is you must create something new, and you've got to be able to sell it. That is the relationship between the scientist and the merchant. So here we have the 3 systems. So you see, we live in the West, not in one world, but in 3 worlds. Each dominated by the power of the scholar in the beginning, the power of the warrior statesman in the second, and the power of the merchant in the third. From spirituality through civilization to our modern world. 3 completely different environments, 3 completely different art manifestations, and 3 completely separate educational frameworks. In Islam, just to say, these 3 powers of the scholar, the warrior statesman, and the merchant were embodied within the person of the Holy Prophet. That wholeness was there. So that in Islamic civilization, these 3 worlds evolved in Mezna, in balance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Keeler. That was incredible, and it was quite a lyrical sort of meditation, more than anything else, and a moving one at times. I have a lot of questions actually, but I wanted to open it up for a few from the audience that can sort of get the ball rolling, and then perhaps I can add one of my own, have you speak, and then we'll come back to the audience for another round, if that's okay. So please raise your hand, and if possible, just say your name so we get to know each other. 1, 2. All right, that's good for now, and then if you have a third.
My name is Ahmed, and I'm from SOAS, thank you so much for your talk. I feel like you left us on a bit of a cliffhanger at the beginning of a new talk. If you had a part 2, what would you be saying after your last slide?
I think you need to read my book. Because quite seriously, in the sense that the slideshow is powerful, I think, because of the incredible pictures. And the story that one's telling is completely revealed by the visual work, by the arts, by the senses, if you like. You know? And so there's so much more in the book, in the sense that this is obviously quite a large subject. And we are, and when you say we left us on the cliff edge, that's where we are. That's the whole point of my book, actually, is that we are on the cliff edge. That's the reality. And it's not, you could say that humanity has always been on the cliff edge, but actually, we're on a cliff edge. You know, and we are in a situation which is unique to humanity's place on this earth. And we all know that, so that's why, and so basically, in the book, I've attempted to kind of put the whole story without pictures, which means that it's completely different, you know, it's got a completely different structure. So I would say there isn't another lecture, particularly, because you've got all the best pictures there.
Somebody take questions there, everyone? Please go ahead.
Back here, that was great. My name is Shella, I'm from Scotland. So having spoken to my colleagues from work about religion, they tend to compare it to their own version of what they think Christianity is. So they assume that Islam is just faith and there's no intellect in Islam, because that's what they're taught in Christianity. So how do you overcome that barrier?
Yeah, it's a very good question.
Let me just get one more.
Yes.
And then we can, so, please.
I liked it, but the thing that's, it's quite clear that everything is scattered and broken up in this current thought process that we have in this world, because of the dichotomy between science and rationality and spirituality. But isn't it, the cat's already out of the bag. In one of your slideshows, you showed the robot and the human being. But we can't stop implants in our body, and most probably in many of our disease processes, Parkinson's for instance, and even in other things, what is coming is going to be augmented implants in our body. And we can't really get out of these processes, and because it's already out there now, we can't put it back. Do we have in our spiritual, is it parallelly developing? Because the scientific world has completely taken a different turn, and it is we may not be able to even reverse global warming and other things, because we are completely on a different path, and spirituality is being left behind, and to catch up and to be relevant with the modern world, I think our thought process from the spiritual side also has to parallelly develop.
So maybe I'll add one question that deals with that and then bring it in. So one of the things that I was curious about in sort of, I'm a historian, so I'll apologize for my periodization question. But one of the things that I think I feel like could perhaps, I felt I needed to push on a little bit, was that the way that you developed the schema of the different worlds and their conjuring. I think it would be interesting to sort of bring in that the production of modernity and capitalism, and in fact the earlier civilizational world, was produced via Islam. in the sense that, the Greek classical tradition, as it were, was reintroduced to Europe through Islam. And so what do we then do with Islam and Muslim world's role and Islamic history's role? Because there was a kind of slippage between who the we is and who the they is here that I feel could be opened up a little more. So that's one piece of that question. The second piece is that, there was a point where you talked really eloquently about knowledge sort of scattering, fragmenting, but also sort of becoming elite, right? And so what I would also want to think about is that how, first, there are conditions of bodies and populations and people, the enslaved, the indentured, the laborer, the peasant, the nomad, that these bodies, these people, also have produced forms of knowledge, right? And that these forms of knowledge were either captured or produced their own kinds of work and politics, right? Which is a word that was quite missing from the presentation. And so I wanted to sort of perhaps hear from you a little bit more about these conditions of capitalism, colonialism, enslavement, labor, that also work in producing knowledge, and are not merely happenstances of sort of elite transformations around ideas. Now it's all, you take whatever you like from that.
Your question, you have to forgive me, because I've now reached short of 80. And one thing I've found is that my memory isn't what it used to be. It was never brilliant, wasn't it? And the problem is, I remember your question. It was a good one. I can't remember what it was. So if you can repeat it, I would be grateful.
So basically, when you speak to your Christian colleagues...
Yeah, that's right, Mike.
Do you remember it?
That was brilliant. It's a brilliant question, because this is one of the great problems. Is the equation of Islam as a religion, like Christianity, and Protestant Christianity, by the way, rather than Catholic. And it's this idea of faith, that religion is just a matter of faith. And this has to do with the complete process of looking at Islam from a Western perspective. And because of the power of the conqueror, the Muslims have obviously tended, with obviously major exceptions, but have tended, and certainly in the general educational framework, have tended to think like a Westerner in this matter. So the story of the golden age of Islam, which you've touched upon, is again one which I really focus on in the book, because this is a Western story to provide Islam with a big part in the story of progress. That's all it is. The Greeks and the Romans did all the spade work. The Muslims kept everything nice and warm, handed it on to the Europeans, to the Renaissance, who then really made something of it. They're like transporters, right? And of course, as time has gone on, the Muslims have produced more and more about it, and they've contributed algebra, and they've done this, that, and the other. But it is to look at the knowledge that they were engaged in from a purely scientific, modern, materialist way. Because Avicenna wasn't like Russell. He didn't think like... Because the really important thing that happens is that whereas in Islam, and Hassan Spaghi will be able to to talk about it far more eloquently. In Islam, all that knowledge about the material realm and the material sciences that they were engaged in, this was all integrated into a holistic framework. You didn't do it without God. It was all a part of that wonder of the creation. What happened that created the uniqueness of the modern scientist was this detachment from the object of knowledge. It was the actually looking at it from the outside, and you being the observer. You know, that great academic idea of objective knowledge. I mean, we all know it's absolute nonsense. The human being is incapable of it. He's capable of partial objectivity. But absolute objectivity, to be in a position where he can actually, for heaven's sake, you've got to be outside of something to be able to do that. And we're not. We're inside it, but we have a delusion that we're actually looking at it from the outside. And that is the difference. So what happened is there was a fundamental change of perspective. That's what was important. That's what's, I mean, you can't look from bows and arrows and swords and chivalry to the atom bomb. You think that could be a natural development? Something that could happen sort of organically? It's got to be something strange and something aberrational that takes place, because that atom bomb is an aberration. It's a disgrace for humanity. That horrible,
mushroom cloud.
that disgusting robot thing that's taken being like, this is a shameful that we as human beings could even imagine that that's who we are. That's going to surpass us. It's mad. It's insanity. And answering your question, so in terms of your question, the really exciting thing is that the glorious achievement and real achievement of Islamic civilization is now being rediscovered. It's not the Western story. The golden age of Islam was not a golden age. There's only one period which is golden and beyond gold in Islam, and that is the 23 years of revelation, when they called it the age of bliss. Imagine. They were talking about a period when they were starved half the time, where they were being attacked, where materially they were extremely uncomfortable, and yet it was the period of bliss. And nothing can compare with it, because they lived under revelation. And that revelation was complete. It took 23 years to be received. And the Prophet ﷺ who received it was whole. And one of the things which we've been working on with Hassan is the most amazing thing, is that in Islamic civilization, nobody of the real scholars, nobody ever questioned the reality of the revelation. They argued about their understanding of it, but never about its reality. It was so powerful because when revelation takes place, it's the point where the unseen actually penetrates and comes into the sea, into our realm. And that is so powerful. And it's more real than a volcanic eruption. It's more real than anything that you can experience in terms of the material realm. When the spiritual world breaks through into the material realm, that is ultimate reality. That is the closest to reality that any human being can ever receive. And that was the quest of the Muslims, the Muslim scholars and intellectuals. It was to reach the point where they could comprehend it. They could comprehend revelation. And through their senses, the artists, what Al-Ghazali calls the wisdom of the craftsman, the artists manifested it through an environment, an Islamic environment, which bespoke unity. The mystics produced works which could indicate it, which could manifest what that meaning, the meaning of it, the experience of it. And the rational mind was completely satisfied in its journey. But because of this Golden Age thesis, nobody has bothered to look at the great works that continued in the Ottoman world and work and reach that point of completion and stability. And this is an incredible story which completely transforms. So as far as what's going to happen in the future, I have no idea. For me, I look upon, I had a theatrical training, I went to drama school, I didn't go to university. And I learned one fantastic thing from there when I look back at it. And that was that we are all actors. We are given our parts. It's already on it. It's his show. He's a producer. So he knows what's going to happen in the future. I have no idea. All I do know is that that robot is a disgrace to human intelligence. And when the human reason, when the thinking mind is detached from its proper place and assumes wholeness, that it is the whole, then it will create the most phenomenal aberration imaginable. Because nothing is more dangerous than the human mind when it goes AWOL. We've experienced that over the last 200 years. Oh, so many times.
Thank you. No, not at all. Thank you so much for that. Unfortunately, we're going to stop now, and the conversation continues. We're going on break, but please join me in thanking Mr. Keeler. I do want to say that for those of you who are undergraduates and are particularly in social sciences and humanities, I think various elements of this will feel recognizable. And questions around some of the ways in which your reading lists are composed would perhaps, some of what you've said certainly speak to the way that our knowledge is pedagogically transferred. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much.